Chapter 5 of The Cruise of the Falcon by E.F. Knight. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 5. Rio de Janeiro. During our stay in this port, we organized several pleasant expeditions up country, but to describe all of these would swell this work to a size far greater than I mean to trouble my readers with. I should like to tell you of the pretty village of Rio Vermelho, where the fresh trade wind blows full on the shore, driving the great Atlantic seas till they break grandly on the rocky beach, scattering showers of spray over the bending coconut palms, whose leaves glisten like diamonds with the salt crystals. I should like to narrate, too, a 5 days' trip of Arnaud and myself, when we crossed the bay, steamed up a river through the jungle and forest, and then progressed higher still in a Negro dugout to the little town of St. Amaro. How, on the muddy banks, the pink crayfish gamboled, and how the branches of the mangroves were thick with oysters hanging like fruit, and how, from St. Amaro, we rode across 50 miles of roadless country to Feira Santa Ana, now by the palatial mansion of some rich sugar planter, surrounded by its slave village and sloping hills of waving cane, and now through virgin forest, where the tall palms rose high above the lesser growth of trees, linked by intricate creepers, lianas, and convolvuli. I should like to linger over the description of the wonderfully plumaged birds, parrot, hummingbird, canary, and 100 others, of the fruits growing wild and in profusion in the woods, pineapples, bananas, mangoes, yuccas, breadfruit, and all the rest. I should like to tell you of the people we met, the half-naked slaves standing outside their huts, with their curious little pot-bellied, wholly naked children, of the proud planter, with poncho and massive silver spurs, galloping across his lands. How we journeyed on from Feira Santa Ana to Cachoeira by train through plantations of sago and coffee, and thence by steamer again down a broad river to the Reconcagua. But all this would fill a volume by itself. Having been now a fortnight in port, we once more prepared for sea. We refilled our rum barrel with white rum, laid in a stock of pineapples, yams, and other vegetables, and on the 6th of November weighed our anchor and sailed out of the Reconcagua. Salvos of crackers and rockets and the tolling of manifold bells from all parts of the city seemed to be bidding us a farewell as we dropped slowly down the smooth bay. In Bahia, every day of the year seems to be a fiesta, and dedicated to some saint or other. Keeping a saint's day here implies a terrible waste of fireworks and clanging of church bells. All day long, for they do not even await the shades of night, the rockets ascend. There is no place in the world like Bahia for these amusements. Far out to sea, you know when you are approaching this port by the sound and the blaze of the worship of its inhabitants. It is called Bahia de Todos os Santos, the Bay of all saints, of all of them, with a vengeance. It is the most religious and most vicious city of religious and vicious Brazil. The eve of our departure there stood forth an omen in the sky, which, said the sailors on shore, is but rarely seen, and only when some terrible hurricane is imminent. Inside the thin crescent of the moon was one solitary bright star, the only one in the heavens. It was a curious appearance, but it seemed to me not likely to be connected with terrestrial storm. Our next port was to be Rio de Janeiro, the beautiful capital of this empire. We had fresh winds from the east to the northeast, and so completed the voyage in 4 days and 20 hours. We carried our spinnaker and gaff topsail nearly all the time. At 5:30 p.m. on the 6th of November, we were outside the Reconcagua off Point San Antonio. By midday, the 7th of November, we had logged 116 miles. The 8th of November, we made 174 miles. The 9th of November, 152 miles. The 10th of November, 167 miles. The 11th of November, 164 miles. It was glorious sunny weather, and bracing and pleasant was the fresh Atlantic breeze, after the rather debilitating climate of Bahia. The second night out would have seemed to some pilot of old as full of alarming portents. The mariner at times does encounter such nights, weird and awe-inspiring, that fill his breast with vague, superstitious terror as he keeps his midnight watches. It was an exceedingly dark night, still. The long ocean swell rolled on smoothly, only at rare intervals breaking into phosphorescent spray. The air was hot and stifling as before a storm. The clouds that passed overhead were utterly black and assumed fantastic shapes. Arnaud recognized Gambetta's head, and a fiend riding across the heavens on a black horse in the slowly floating masses of vapor. It seemed at times as if the whole sky was full of uneasy spirits, fixing up everything ready for a good old hurricane. The moon only appeared at intervals through rifts in the cloud. It was surrounded by a beautiful triple halo of green, yellow, and pink circles. In the middle watch the sky cleared somewhat, and Arnaud and myself became the amazed spectators of several most remarkable phenomena, meteoric or electric, I cannot be certain which. We saw first, in the midst of a cloud, an appearance like that of a great shell bursting. It illuminated the whole cloud and the sea for a moment, and its explosion was accompanied with a dull thud. Again, we observed several meteors that sailed across the sky like rockets, with bright trails of fire, and then burst. A mysterious night this, on the warm tropic sea, ominous of tempest, which, however, did not overtake us. On the fourth night out, we kept a sharp lookout for Cape Frio, in whose neighborhood we knew ourselves to be. There is a lighthouse on this point, with a powerful light. We made it out about 2 a.m. As we neared the cape, the thermometer fell rapidly, till we really felt quite cold for the first time since we had left England. This sudden fall of the temperature is always experienced near Cape Frio, hence its name, the Cold Cape. I believe the phenomenon is attributed to the presence of some oceanic current of cold water which comes to the surface hereabouts. This cape is also famous for the furious squalls that sweep down from it seawards. When daylight came, we discerned land once more on the starboard bow, a distant range of blue mountains which we recognized from their sharp spire-like peaks to be the Organ Mountains, which lie to the back of the Bay of Rio. On approaching the entrance of the gulf, the water shallowed and became light green in color. The sea, as is not uncommon on this bar, was coming in heavy breaking rollers, which would have proved dangerous to many a yacht of the Falcon's tonnage that I know of. We heard that a heavy pampero had been blowing for 3 or 4 days to the south of Rio, hence the exceptionally disturbed condition of the sea when we arrived. Who can describe the grandeur of the gates of the Bay of Rio, and the wonderful beauty of the bay itself? I thought nothing could be so beautiful as the Reconcagua of Bahia, and lo, here is a gulf that transcends all one's wildest dreams of the magnificence of tropical scenery. Not here are the gently sloping hills of the Reconcagua. The entrance of this bay is between stupendous and fantastically serrated mountains. Steep and forbidding domes of granite fall sheer into the boiling surf. The aspect of this coast from the sea is grand and terrible in the extreme. But once within the bay, all changes. One moment we were running before a cool, strong breeze rolling heavily in the steep seas. The next moment we had passed between 2 walls of rock. We had entered the inland sea. Immediately the water fell smooth as glass. The wind died away, and the bracing sea breeze was changed for the sultry atmosphere of the tropic harbor. We came to an anchor inside the island and fortress of Villagagnon. What a scene was there round us! What a variety of beautiful form and color! To give any adequate description of this bay is quite impossible. It is as extensive as the Reconcagua of Bahia, and it is studded with the most beautiful islands, whose beaches are lined with coconuts and stately palms. All around the bay rise the stupendous mountains, some covered with gorgeous colored forests, others of barren crags and lowering precipice. And there, stretching far along the shore, is the Empire City, Rio Janeiro, the Queen of South America, lying at the foot of an amphitheater of great mountains. There is the huge granite crag of the Sugarloaf, seeming ready to fall down on the suburbs at any moment. There is the Gavia, a square-headed mass of rock with a flat top like Table Mountain. There is the Tajuca and the forest-covered Corcovado, with its springs of sweet water, and all around the inland sea are little sheltered bays, the most beautiful imaginable, with beaches of silver sand and wonderful tropical forests covering the mountainsides, where the guava and mango grow in wild profusion. And there are islands in these bays too, like the little gardens of Eden. Our first stroll through the city gave us a very favorable impression of it. We were evidently in a civilized and luxurious capital, where we could recreate and relax very pleasantly for a few days. Rio Janeiro is a fine city of about 500,000 inhabitants, and is thus much larger than Bahia. It is also much whiter than Bahia. The Negroes here are not in so overwhelming a majority as in the former city. Tramways, of course, are everywhere. Gas and tramways are the specialties of Rio. No town in the world is so well lit. Far beyond the city, up to the mountain tops, through the country lanes, are the tram metals laid and the lamps planted. Far out to sea is the city visible by night by the great glare of it. 5 minutes after landing, instinct led us to the establishment of Jimmy Graham, the well-known Yankee barman. A smart man is Graham. As you enter his place, the first thing in the morning, uncertain as to what your eye-opener shall be, do not, if you be a wise man, tax your brains on the subject. Jimmy knows what will fix you up better than you do. Simply say, "Graham, I want you to prescribe for me." "Take a seat," he will reply. He will look at your face for a moment or so with a shrewd eye, then a gleam of intelligence will flit over his expressive face. He has diagnosed your case. "Well, I guess I can fix you up what you want." And forthwith he will arrange for you some iced, delectable poison, long or short as the case may be, which you find will exactly suit your disease and make a new man of you. But if you are the rare bird, a wise man, you will forswear strong drinks in this climate, and patronize Jimmy only for the prawn curries he knows how to prepare, and the delicate rock oysters from the bay. This first evening we went up to dine at the Hotel Vista Alegre, which is out of the close city on the healthy hillside. Thither we traveled partly by train and partly up a very steep, inclined plane in a car which is hoisted by a chain, just like the railway from Lyon to Croix-Rousse. It was now night, and the aspect of the city and the bay from the elevation at which we were was very strange and beautiful. Steep ravines and hillsides sloped from our feet to the city, mountains were around us, and all were lit by myriads of gas jets. The crags were covered with the rich vegetation of the tropics. Tall palms towered above the houses. A most fairy-like view, a wonderful contrast of city streets and nature at her grandest. Rio is a lively town enough after dull Bahia, for here we have theaters, an opera house, an alcazar, concert gardens like those of Paris, and other dissipations. The Rua Ovidor is the Bond Street of Rio. Carriages are prohibited from traversing it after dark, for it is then that the Brazilian ladies promenade this narrow thoroughfare to do their shopping. 10 p.m. is the fashionable hour. The Negroes here live a very out-of-door life, and one thus acquires a very fair insight into the habits of their private life, or rather what would be the private life in the case of a white man. The Negro barber carries on his profession in the middle of the street. When a customer comes, he simply sets him down on the pavement, if no other seat be at hand, and lathers his chin and shaves away, undisturbed by the crowd of little Negroes that generally admiringly surround the artist. Here, sitting in a long string on the curbstone of a crowded street, are Negro slaves weaving straw hats. Listen to them. That barbaric tongue cannot be Portuguese. No, it is an African dialect. For these are not Creoles of Brazil, like most of the slaves here, but Africans, men who have once known freedom. I had noticed that one of these half-naked hat weavers was always treated with great respect by his fellows. He was a giant in size, and had evidently been a man of uncommon strength. But he was now of great age, his back was bent, and his curly wool was white as snow. I was informed that he had once been one of the greatest kings of Africa, and that all Africans from his part of that continent, even over here in America after years of slavery, observed the same form of etiquette when approaching him as they perforce did in the old times, when he was every inch a king, and the life and death of his subjects were in his hand. Barbarous indeed these savage courtiers must be, thus to still revere their prince, and be loyal to him, knowing well that there is not the slightest chance of his ever again recovering his freedom and his kingdom, and being in a position to reward them for their fidelity. For it is not only by mere courtesy that they show their devotion. It is customary for them to quarrel among themselves as to who shall complete the aged sovereign's daily hat-weaving task, when their younger and nimbler fingers have completed their own. You can observe this amiable squabble among the poor fellows every afternoon, the old king sitting the while blinking sleepily, taking no interest in the proceedings, apathetic beneath the burdens of his many years, and now, I should imagine, hardly remembering and regretting those days when, at furious speed, he rode along the Niger's bank. 2 days after our arrival at Rio, we got up anchor and sailed up the bay to the island of Paqueta, a distance of about 10 miles. This is a pretty little wooded, hilly island with a population of about 1,700. A friend of Jourdain, an ex-Royal Mail officer, and now superintendent of that company in Brazil, was living here with his family, so we came to an anchor off his house and remained there until we sailed for the River Plate. A beautiful spot it was, nestling among the stately palms and bamboos, tamarids and almonds, and very pleasant it was for us, after our semi-savage life, to see once more in Mr. May's hospitable home the faces of English ladies and English children. The island of Paqueta is a lovely little corner of earth to pass a lazy time in. Here we are, for instance, in the evening sitting in Mr. May's veranda, puffing at our postprandial cigars. The too short tropic dusk has passed, and it is night. All around us is the tropic garden of rare fruits and palms and creepers. The garden terminates on a sandy beach, on which break, with gentle splashes, the small waves of the sheltered bay. Along the sand is a fringe of coconut trees, waving their great leaves gently in the evening breeze. A promontory of round boulders projects, a dark mass, into the water, gleaming in silver arrows under the moon. Beyond the rocky islets and palm promontories, across the broad bay is seen, looming dark against the sky, the opposite coast, with the mountains of the interior still further back, vague and misty. The faint lights of the charcoal burners' fires are seen here and there on the far-off hillsides, where the virgin forests are, and to return once more to the foreground, there within a stone's throw rides the stately old Falcon at anchor. Now add to this the still, warm night air, heavy with the odor of flowers and fruits and spices, the flight of bats, the perpetual shrill cries of cicadas, the sad splash of the waves on the rocks, and you have the very surroundings for an indolent man who loves to ponder silently over his cigars and coffee, or rather not even to ponder at all, but sink into that reverie qui ne pense à rien, his mind intoxicated with the beauty of all that fervid yet lazy nature around him. But after all, there are few lotus-eaters at Paqueta. Certain perspiring black savages, with a rag around the waist as their sole clothing, here pass anything but a life of dolce far niente. Above the cry of the cicada and the moaning of the sea and the rustling of the palm trees, all through the long night, from the time that the sun sinks into the fiery crimson clouds that crown the Organ Mountains to when he rises again from the Atlantic, you can hear a strange and melancholy song rising in wild bursts on the night air, a barbaric, monotonous, and sad chorus, such as Israelite bondsmen might have sung long ago in Egypt. And this, too, is a chorus of bondsmen, of African slaves, for there are lime works on Paqueta Island, and by night and day, unceasingly, the native blacks toil on in batches. The night watchers are obliged to sing this chorus at intervals, so that their master in his bed, if he chances to be awake, may know that they are toiling and watching, and not falling to sleep with weariness. This lime is made from the shells of the oysters that so thickly cover every rock in the Gulf of Rio. About Paqueta can be seen daily a regular squadron of quaint native craft, manned by naked slaves dredging for the bivalves. The process is a very primitive one, involving a great deal of labor and very little proportionate results. The slave has a long bamboo with a small cradle fitted to one end. This he scrapes along the rocky bottom, raising each time only a handful or so of shells, I should imagine. I will not inflict on my readers a description of the lions of Rio and its neighborhood, which of course we did. And what city on earth has such marvelous scenery in its immediate neighborhood? Why, even in the narrow streets of the city itself, you come suddenly on the most lovely little oases of tropical vegetation. Here, for instance, is a gloomy and ugly old mansion in a squalid lane. It has some pretensions to architecture, and it is the palace of some merchant prince, maybe, but it is as dingy and uninteresting looking as are the houses near Fitzroy Square. You are passing it, when suddenly the portal of it is opened, and there is revealed a glimpse of paradise itself. Under that dark door, as a frame, is seen a bit of bright azure sky above, and below a garden. But what a garden! What color, what form! Among the dazzling creepers and bushes, stone fawns and nymphs disport themselves, and fountains splash on cool marble and tessellated pavements. And down the great garden is a drive through an avenue of immense palms, smooth and straight as columns, with their leaves joining overhead like the aisle of a cathedral of giants. It is a glimpse into fairyland. Then the portal closes, and we might almost be in dingy London, save for the sky above and the negroes around. So pleasant was found our stay here that it was not till 40 days had passed unnoticed by that we sailed from Rio. We came in on November 11th and left on December 21st. It was the midsummer here south of the line, but the heat on the Brazilian coast is rarely oppressive. Our thermometer in the cabin only once, as far as I remember, registered more than 95 degrees. We found lots to do, sometimes in the city, sometimes making pleasant excursions into the interior, sometimes organizing cruises and picnics with the Falcon in the bay, and, best of all to my mind, sailing about in the dinghy among the beautiful islands near Paqueta. Those little exploring expeditions were most delightful. There is a little archipelago of islands near Paqueta, all beautiful, some large, with pleasant villages of peaceable mulatto folk, others uninhabited but overflowing with a glorious vegetation, others bare, mere boulders rising from the clear water with, maybe, a solitary cactus growing on the summit. Nowhere on earth is there an inland water so adapted for a cruise in a small boat. One could travel on for months and anchor each night off some new picturesque island or in some new bay, so extensive is this great winding gulf. Here is the log of one of these little cruises. One glorious morning I put the mast and sail in the dinghy, provisioned her with a keg of water, a bottle of wine, bread, oranges, pipe, tobacco, matches, and sketching materials, and started for a solitary sail. First, I circumnavigated Paqueta, keeping close to the shore, where the palms overhang the water, steering among the great boulders. These boulders that rise out of the Gulf of Rio are of interest to the geologist. They are smoothly rounded by the action of water into a dome shape, and nearly all of them are split down the middle as by wedges, so that they present the appearance of so many episcopal mitres. Then, passing several islets, I reached one, an uninhabited little paradise which I named Coconut Island from the multitude of those graceful trees that lined its shores, and I beached the dinghy in a sandy little cove. If that island could be transported, as it is now, to Kew Gardens, it would be one of the sights of Europe. It was hilly, and about a mile or rather more in circumference, and covered with a dense vegetation. Mangoes and tamarinds and the most gorgeous flowers grew on its slopes, all bound together by intricate network of lianas and purple-flowered convolvuli. Brilliant plumaged hummingbirds and rainbow-hued butterflies seemed to be the sole inhabitants. From the summit of the island one looked over the broad many-island bay and the far mountains glowing under the blue tropic vault. In order to acquire an appetite for my picnic, I treated myself to a plentiful feast of oysters. All the rocks were covered with these up to the high water mark, Small and delicate they were, too, so I waded about in tepid water, cutting them off in clusters with my knife. Then came lunch, for which the mangoes on the island provided a dessert. Then off again to explore further islets, all uninhabited, till I felt like a sort of Robinson Crusoe of a half-dozen isles instead of one. And the sun was low, and it was time to beat back against the fresh sea breeze to where the Falcon lay at anchor by the stately row of palms. One of the things to be done by the visitor to Rio is Petropolis, a model highland village founded by the Emperor of the Brazils, and in the midst of which he has built to himself a summer pleasure palace. Thither one fine morning we proceeded, and a pleasant journey it was. First, a steamer took us across the bay to a point where a train awaited us. After but a short voyage on the line, we again changed our mode of conveyance, and entered one of the 6 coaches that were intended to carry passengers across the mountains to the imperial village. In single file they slowly ascended the pass, a fine road in sharp zigzags, reminding one of Les Echelles of the Mount Cenis. But the view around was somewhat different. Not the gray crags and the snows and somber pines of the Alps on this tropical mountain pass. On either side of us were palms, tree ferns, lianas, and all manner of unknown plants and flowers, with colors such as no orthodox plant should have, stolen from the minerals. Great leaves of burnished copper strewed the ground, and the green and silvers and yellows and reds of the twining creepers and flowers were as of molten and incandescent metals. The parrots, hummingbirds, butterflies, and beetles, gaudy-hued as they were not more so than this glorious vegetation they inhabited. From the summit of the pass the view was grand in the extreme. A vast expanse of country lay beneath us like a plan. The mountains sloped down from our feet to a dark wooded plain. Beyond that was all the Bay of Rio, with its islands and mountains, the Sugarloaf guarding the entrance, and then still farther the Atlantic horizon line. Descending again, we soon reached our destination, the luxurious village nestling in a hollow of the forest-clad hills. We rattled down the main street, by which flows a babbling river shaded by avenues of willows, and, dismounting, introduced ourselves to Mr. Mills of the comfortable English hotel, who forthwith proposed to mix for us the refreshing cocktail of the New World while dinner was preparing. Petropolis is built in the center of a large imperial estate. The emperor, who is, as everyone knows, not only one of the most hard-working monarchs in the world, but is one of the most active in every scheme of benevolence, is, if nowhere else, popular in Petropolis. Some years ago, some pseudo-philanthropists sent over to Rio a large batch of German colonists. When the unfortunates landed, they found they were not wanted, there was nothing for them to do. They lay about the quays, living on garbage, till yellow fever thinned their ranks woefully. They would probably all have perished, had not the emperor taken up the matter. He transported them en masse to his highland estate, where the cooler climate permits the white man to work without danger in the fields, and founded Petropolis. And now it stands as a model village in which there is no sordid house, no poverty. All is clean, tidy, and prosperous looking. For some miles around, where the forest is cleared, are little farms of happy and contented people. And so, as you ride along the well-made roads that traverse the little colony, you perceive about you everywhere comfortable-looking Teutons with blue eyes and yellow hair, and well-dressed children going to school, and comely matrons knitting at cottage doors, as in Europe, instead of the half-naked Negroes and the barbarism of the slave plantations which surround this little oasis of liberty. And now, in addition to all this, a further cause of prosperity has come to the village of Dom Pedro II, for a blessing seems to be on the place. The cool and healthy air has induced many of the wealthy citizens of Rio to resort here during the summer months, when the yellow fever is hanging about the hot city. It is rapidly becoming quite a fashionable little place, and several good hotels have sprung up around the imperial summer palace. We stayed at Mills's 2 days, visited the virgin forest, another thing we had to do, in a downpour of rain. I think we were done more than the forest was, for we did not appreciate its beauties under the depressing circumstances, though we had brought some canna with us wherewith to dilute the rain. Besides, the virgin forest was a fraud, though a beautiful one, for the vegetation of it was in no wise more magnificent than that of most portions of the neighboring country, though these gave themselves no high-sounding titles. From Petropolis we took coach to Entre Rios, a drive of about 50 miles, along a very well-kept road. The coach mules were splendid animals and carried us on in grand style, past the coffee plantations and the uncleared forest. From Entre Rios we travelled about on the Dom Pedro Railway in a rather unmeaning way from one uninteresting place to another. On the 15th of December we sailed from delightful Paqueta to our old berth off Rio, under Fort Villagagnon. The weather was now becoming oppressive, 95 in the shade with no cool nights as a relief. The calm water in the harbor began to stink horribly, and far from odorous was the vegetable refuse that lay about the markets. So Yellow Jack found his opportunity, and there were 5 vessels in the harbor with the ominous yellow flag flying at their main. While we were at anchor here, the Emperor came off to the Falcon in the Wanderer's launch. He was interested in our cruise, and, as I understand, intended to honor us with a visit. Unfortunately, we were all on shore at the time, so he merely steamed around us, and remarked that we must be very uncomfortable and very foolish to wander about the oceans in such a cockleshell. If I were an emperor, I think I should be of the same opinion, and prefer something a good deal bigger if I cruised at all. But, after all, would it be half so enjoyable? Maybe not. For several days in succession during our stay, a violent squall arose every afternoon in the bay. The weather would wax sultrier and sultrier from sunrise till about 3 p.m., when suddenly a mass of black cloud would sweep over the sky, pouring down rain in such torrents as only tropical clouds can, accompanied by thunder and lightning. These squalls blew with very great force, lashing the bay into a mass of foam. On 2 occasions we had to put down 2 anchors, with 50 fathoms on each, to prevent driving. One day during the squall 2 large vessels near us fouled each other in consequence of the anchors of one dragging. Signals of distress were hoisted, and 2 men-of-war's boats' crews were sent to their assistance. After considerable damage had been incurred by both, they were cleared. This is the old-fashioned Rio weather. Once this daily storm was so regular in its coming that it was customary when one made an appointment with another to say, "I will meet you after or before the storm," as the case might be. But of late years the climate of Rio has changed considerably, as has that of every part of the world, it seems, more or less, and the 3 p.m. storm is not as punctual as was his wont of old. One of our crew here left us, Andrews, so we were now rather undermanned, and determined to pick up someone else in the plate. It was now about time for us to leave Rio. 2 of us were down with slight attacks of fever, and we all felt as if the fresh winds of the Atlantic would be beneficial as a change. We had made the acquaintance of the officers of the SS Norseman in Rio, the telegraph vessel of the Anglo-Brazilian Telegraph Company. She was bound about this time for Maldonado in Uruguay, and the captain kindly offered, if he met us out at sea, to give us a tow if we were in want of one. Maldonado Bay, he told us, was a pleasant spot, with lots of sport on shore, and in every way preferable to Flores Island as a place to spend our quarantine in. For into quarantine we were certain to be thrust as soon as we touched at any Uruguayan or Argentine port after leaving Rio. The River Plate people have the greatest dread of yellow fever. Their countries lie outside the usual limits of this pest, but they have a vivid reminiscence of the fearful epidemic at Buenos Aires 10 years ago, when the whole city was put into rigid quarantine, all business was at a standstill, and the horrors of a medieval plague, such as that of Florence, were experienced to the full in the crowded South American city. No less than 1,000 people perishing in a day for several weeks. End of chapter 5.